Charleston shaken by earthquake, Columbia burning to the ground, hurricanes sweeping the Sea Islands. South Carolina in the 1800s was never still. These photographs capture devastation and resilience side by side. Watch closely, because hidden in these silent images are stories that shaped a state and still echo through history. Charleston from St. Michael's Church, 1900. From the Tower of St. Michael's, Charleston in 1900 stretched out with renewed dignity. Streets lined with trolley tracks and rooftops reflected a city rebuilt from the ashes. St. Philip's steeple rose proudly in the distance, reminding all that despite fire and war, Charleston's soul had endured into a new century. White Point Garden, Charleston, 1900. White Point Garden offered Charleston a serene public refuge. At its center stood the monument to Sergeant William Jasper, Revolutionary War hero, whose bravery at Sullivan's Island became legend. Beneath moss-draped oaks, benches awaited quiet reflection, while the statue reminded all of Charleston's enduring spirit and patriotic legacy. East Battery Parade, Charleston, 1900. East Battery stretched proudly along Charleston Harbor. Elegant mansions faced the sea breeze, their piazzas symbols of Southern grace. The seawall walkway invited quiet strolls where tides met cobblestones. This view captured a city reclaiming its charm after war and fire, standing resilient at the edge of the Atlantic. Confederate Monument, Magnolia Cemetery, Charleston, 1900. Rows of white markers stretched quietly at Magnolia Cemetery, each stone honoring a fallen Confederate soldier. At the center rose the Confederate Monument, framed by solemn pines and southern magnolias. The peaceful scene masked the city's turbulent past, where remembrance and mourning shaped Charleston's turn-of-the-century landscape. Meeting Street and St. Michael's Church, 1900. Meeting Street in 1900 shows Charleston's quiet elegance, with cobblestones, streetcar rails, and newly strung electric wires crossing the sky. To the right stands historic St. Michael's Church, its steeple a constant landmark since colonial days. Life moved slowly here, where tradition and progress met in the southern air. Trolley car in Columbia, South Carolina, 1900. Columbia embraced modern transport with its trolley cars, gliding along tracks through pine-lined avenues. These electric cars connected downtown with outlying neighborhoods, symbolizing progress and urban growth. Where once war had brought flames, the steady hum of trolleys now carried South Carolina into the rhythms of a new century. Charleston Orphan House, 1900. Standing proudly in Charleston, the Orphan House was the first public orphanage in the United States, founded in 1790. Its imposing facade reflects both civic pride and a sense of solemn duty. Behind these walls, countless children found shelter, discipline, and hope in a city shaped by history. Main Street, Columbia, 1900. Seen from the steps of the State House, Columbia's Main Street in 1900 bustled with new life. Streetcars rolled past shops and tall buildings, while the clock tower kept time over a modernizing capital. From ashes of war, Columbia had risen into a city of energy, commerce, and confidence for the new century.
Today, at this very moment, are you enjoying this nostalgic trip? Like and subscribe now to follow all 50 U.S. states in rare, colorized photos. Don't miss the rest of the journey.
Claflin University, Orangeburg, 1899. Students and faculty gathered proudly before the main building of Claflin University at Orangeburg. Founded after the Civil War to educate African Americans, Claflin became a beacon of opportunity in the Reconstruction South. This image captured hope, resilience, and the pursuit of knowledge, shaping a new generation in South Carolina. Bird's eye view of Aiken, 1899. Seen from above, Aiken revealed wide streets, neat houses, and growing neighborhoods. Once a quiet southern town, it had become a hub for winter visitors, rail travel, and new businesses. This panoramic view symbolized the steady transformation of South Carolina's small towns as they stepped into the modern era. Spanish-American war soldiers in Columbia, 1898. Main Street in Columbia filled with soldiers returning from the Spanish-American War. Crowds watched as columns of men marched past storefronts and telegraph poles, symbols of a modernizing city. The parade blended pride and relief, marking South Carolina's place in America's new century of expansion and global reach. Miles Bruton House Gate, Charleston, 1895. At 27 King Street in Charleston, the imposing gate of the Miles Bruton House stood as it had since the 18th century. Photographed in 1895, its stone pillars and ironwork told of wealth and endurance. While war and fire scarred the city, Charleston's colonial homes preserved whispers of its oldest stories. Bull Street, Charleston, 1895. Photographed in 1895, this residence on Bull Street in Charleston reflected the city's colonial architecture, sturdy, symmetrical, and enduring. While Charleston was reshaped by war, fire, and modern growth, these homes stood as anchors of identity. Each brick held echoes of a past still woven into the life of the city. After the Sea Islands Hurricane, 1893. In the aftermath of the devastating hurricane of August 27, 1893, workers in South Carolina sorted seed potatoes to restore drowned fields on the Sea Islands. Thousands had perished, and survivors faced famine. This moment of recovery revealed resilience, solidarity, and the constant battle between human labor and nature's fury. Marion Square and Calhoun Monument, Charleston, 1892. This view of Marion Square in Charleston captures children gathered near the first monument to John C. Calhoun, later replaced by a taller version. The square, framed by churches and civic buildings, was both a social hub and a political statement, reflecting South Carolina's memory and contested legacy at the dawn of modernity. 262 Meeting Street, Charleston, 1890. This late 19th century view of Meeting Street shows a sturdy brick commercial block at 262 Meeting, reflecting Charleston's recovery decades after war and fire. With electric poles rising along the street and arcaded storefronts beneath, the photo captures a city balancing its colonial charm with the march of modernization at the century's end. Fort Hill, Clemson, 1887. This image shows Fort Hill, the former plantation home that later became part of Clemson University. On the porch sits Thomas Green Clemson himself, whose legacy shaped higher education in South Carolina. The photograph links antebellum traditions with the educational future, marking the state's passage from its plantation past into a new institutional era. The most powerful earthquake, Charleston, 1886. On the night of August 31, 1886, Charleston was struck by the most powerful earthquake ever recorded on the eastern seaboard of the United States. With an estimated magnitude between 6.9 and 7.3, the tremor lasted less than a minute, yet its destruction was immense. Entire blocks of brick buildings crumbled, church towers fell, and cobblestone streets disappeared under piles of debris. More than 2,000 structures were damaged or destroyed, leaving families without homes and businesses in ruins. The disaster claimed over 100 lives, and the city's skyline, familiar for centuries, was forever altered in the span of a single night. Sullivan's Island Lighthouse, 1885. Standing at Charleston Harbor's edge, the Sullivan's Island South Range front light guided ships through dangerous waters. Built in 1885, this modest structure played a crucial role in maritime safety. Behind it, Fort Moultrie's defenses still lingered, reminding sailors of Charleston's strategic past, where commerce and conflict shared the horizon. Rutledge Avenue, Charleston, 1883. Lined with elegant homes shaded by bare winter trees, Rutledge Avenue stretched north from Calhoun Street, symbolizing Charleston's recovery after war and fire. By 1883, the avenue blended quiet residential charm with the city's enduring resilience, where streetcar rails hinted at progress while verandas whispered stories of Charleston's storied southern past. King Street, Charleston, 1883. In 1883, King Street thrived as Charleston's bustling commercial hub. Its storefronts displayed goods beneath awnings, while pedestrians and carriages shared the wide thoroughfare. Merchants catered to a growing middle class, and the orderly facades reflected both tradition and progress, capturing the balance between Charleston's historic charm and its drive toward modernization. Broad Street, Charleston, 1883. Broad Street stood as one of Charleston's busiest arteries, lined with brick buildings and lively storefronts. Horse-drawn carts and an early streetcar moved along the tracks, carrying people and goods through the city. This thoroughfare symbolized Charleston's enduring role as a center of trade, governance, and daily urban life. City Hall, Charleston, 1882. This photograph of Charleston City Hall captures the council chamber where the city's affairs were debated and decided. Elegant wooden furniture, chandeliers, and high ceilings reflect the architectural dignity of the era. The room served as the political heart of Charleston, where leaders shaped policies in the post-Reconstruction South. Charleston in 1865, a city in ashes. In 1865, Charleston stood as a city scarred by war, fire, and surrender. Once the proud cradle of Southern power, its streets and landmarks now bore silent testimony to devastation. Each ruin, each broken wall, whispered the story of a community caught between collapse and the faint hope of renewal. The circular church lay shattered, its great columns framing a skyline of emptiness. Children sat among its ruins, their small figures a poignant reminder that even in destruction, life carried on. Faith itself seemed reduced to rubble, yet its memory endured in stone and silence. Nearby, the majestic Cathedral of St. John and St. Finbar stood roofless, its Gothic towers skeletal against the sky. Once Charleston's spiritual crown, it had fallen victim to the Great Fire of 1861 and years of bombardment. The scene became a monument not of triumph, but of endurance. At Fort Sumter, the birthplace of the Civil War, gaping breaches in its walls revealed the weight of countless shells. The fortress, once a proud symbol of defiance, now embodied the heavy cost of conflict. Silent cannons and shattered bricks told of a war that began in Charleston and scarred the entire nation. Streets like Vendue Range and East Bay lay in desolation, their markets empty and their facades broken. Where trade once flourished, only dust and silence remained. The city's lifeblood, commerce, had been drained, leaving behind a hollow shell of former prosperity. On Meeting Street, the dignified columns of Hibernian Hall still stood, a reminder of civic pride amid ruins. Yet even here, war had left its mark, for this hall replaced Secession Hall, which had burned during the fire. Charleston's political heart had been silenced, though its architecture remained to witness history. From the roof of the orphan asylum, one could see the panorama of destruction. The citadel stood in the distance, while rooftops bore scars of bombardment. The orphan asylum itself, once a refuge for children, had been turned into a hospital for federal soldiers, a striking symbol of how war reshaped daily life. Amid this ruin, Magnolia Cemetery filled with white markers, each one a silent testament to the lives lost. The Confederate monument rose above the rows of graves, solemnly honoring sons of Charleston who would never return. Here, memory and mourning became inseparable. By April 1865, Charleston was a city of ashes. Its churches, homes, and streets told of loss. Yet within those ruins lingered resilience. The war had ended, but the city's story was far from over. Charleston stood at a crossroads, its grandeur broken, but its spirit unextinguished. Ruins of Columbia, South Carolina, 1865. Photographed in 1865 from the state capitol, Columbia stretched out in ruins after Sherman's march. The once thriving city lay silent, reduced to skeletal walls and charred remains. George N. Barnard captured a haunting panorama where smoke had cleared but devastation lingered, a stark vision of South Carolina's shattered heart. Hospital Number 15, Beaufort, 1864. Photographed in December 1864, this image shows firemen with their engine in front of Hospital Number 15, located in the George Parsons Eliot House on Bay Street, Beaufort. The building, repurposed during the Civil War, reflects how Southern structures were adapted to meet urgent wartime medical needs. Refugee Quarters, Mitchellville, 1864. Built on Hilton Head Island in October 1864, these wooden quarters housed freedmen and their families in Mitchellville, one of the first self-governed towns for formerly enslaved people. Simple yet vital, the structure symbolized resilience, offering both shelter and the beginnings of independence after the collapse of slavery. Morris Island Camp, 1863. This photograph shows a Union camp on Morris Island, South Carolina, during the Civil War. The island was a strategic site in the Siege of Charleston Harbor, remembered for the assault on Fort Wagner. Wooden barracks, wagons, and soldiers reflect the harsh, temporary life on this battlefield outpost. Brick Church, Frogmore, St. Helena Island, South Carolina, 1862. Between 1862 and 1865, this quiet brick church near Frogmore on St. Helena Island stood beneath towering oaks draped in Spanish moss. During the Civil War, the island became a Union foothold, and such churches often served as gathering places for freedmen and soldiers alike, embodying resilience amid upheaval. Charleston Custom House, 1853. This photograph captures the Charleston Custom House under construction, a symbol of the city's commercial power. Built in neoclassical style, it reflected Charleston's status as a major port before the Civil War. The unfinished site shows scaffolding and stonework marking the early stages of a landmark still standing today. South Carolina's journey through the 19th century was marked by fire, ruin, and rebirth. Its streets, churches, and shores stood as silent witnesses to history's trials. In every scar, a lesson remained. In every rebuilding, a promise endured. These images remind us that resilience is the truest legacy of time.